Aeneid 12. When Turnus saw that the Latin forces were beaten down, saw that his promises had now come due, and that all eyes were on him, his pride hardened to iron, and his spirit burned. A lion prowling the fields around Carthage is wounded in the chest by hunters, and only then wakens to war. Tossing his shaggy mane with joy, he snaps the spear and roars with a blood-stained mouth. So too the fury mounting in Turnus. He stormed to the king Latinus, and said, I am not waiting. There is no need for Aeneas and his coward to recant. I will meet him in single combat. Draw up the pact, father, and begin the rites. Either this arm pitches the Asian tramp into Tartarus, with the Latins watching, and my sword restores our nation's honor, or he rules with Lavinia as his bride. I literally just checked how to pronounce this. Sorry. Latinus and Latinus, steady and calm, replied, the more spirited you, our champion, are, the more heroic, the more carefully I must ponder and weigh every chance. You have your father Daunus's kingdom and all the towns you have taken in war, nor do I, Latinius, lack gold or influence. There are in Latium all the brides of noble birth for you. Now listen to me hard, and take this to heart. All the oracles and the augurs forbade me to wed my child to any of the suitors she had in the past. But I was overcome by love for you and our ties of kinship, overcome by the tears of my sorrowful queen, and I broke all bonds. I betrayed my child's betrothed and took up impious arms. From that day on, you see, Turnus, how I have been best by war, and the burdens you, above all, must bear. Defeated twice in battle, we can scarcely guard, even within our walls, the hopes of Italy. The Tiber still flows warm with our blood. The great plains are white with our bones. Why do I waver? What madness possesses me? If with Turnus dead, I am ready to accept the Trojans as allies, why not end the struggle while he is still unharmed? What will they say, your Rutilian kinsmen, the rest of Italy, if fortune avert my words, I deliver you to death, while you ask to marry my daughter? Give some thought to war's hazards. Pity your aged father, sorrowing in Ardea. Latinius's words did nothing to dispel Turnus's fury. The very attempt inflamed his rage and made it mount higher. When he could speak again, he had this to say. For my sake, sire, do nothing for my sake, and permit me to purchase fame with death. I, too, can throw spears, father, and when I strike, blood flows from the wound. His goddess mother won't be there for him, lurking in the mist, to hide his womanly flight in cloud. But the queen, railing with horror at the new rules of the engagement, wept and raved for death as she clung to the man betrothed to her daughter. Sorry, I can't talk. By these tears, I beg of you, Turnus, by any reverence you have for your beloved Amata, you are my only hope, the only comfort to my sad old age, and you depend on the honor of the Latinus and in the declining fortunes of our house. This one thing I beg of you, do not commit yourself to this combat. Whatever fate awaits you in battle awaits me also, and together with you I will leave this hateful light before I see Aeneas as my captor and my son. Lavinia heard her mother's words, tears stinging her cheeks, and the blood ran to her face. like the crimson dye staining Indian ivory, or the blush of white lilies mingled with roses. Sorry, can't read either. Turnus stared at the girl, distraught by his love for her, and then, more avid than ever for war, he turned to Amata and said briefly, "Don't pester me with tears, or be a bird built." Take two. Take three. Don't pester me with tears, or be the bird of ill omen as I go off to battle, mother. Turnus cannot delay his death. Idmon, take this message to the Phrygian. A message he will not be glad to hear. As soon as tomorrow's dawn, riding in her crimson chariot red as the sky, let him not lead his Trucian troops against the Rutilians. Let the Trucian arms and Rutilians rest. We will decide the war with our own blood. On that field, let Lavinia be wooed and be won as a bride. Turnus spoke and ran back into the palace. He called for his horses and smiled to see him, neighing and prancing. Horses Orithia herself had given to Pilumnus, glorious animals whiter than snow, faster than the wind. The grooms were drumming on their chests with cupped palms and combing their manes. Turnus strapped onto his shoulders a corselet plated with gold and pale bronze. He lifted a shield, put on a crimson-crested helmet, and slung on the sword that the Lord of Fire had made for Daunus, dripping the white-hot steel into the waters of Styx. His spear leaning against a column in the middle of the hall, a spear taken as spoil from the Arcadian actor. Turnus gripped the stout spear and shook it, quivering, and cried out, "Spear that has never failed my call, the hour has come. Actor once bore you mightily, now you are in the hand of Turnus. Grant that I lay the Phrygian Eunuch out on the ground, rip away his corset, and grind into the dirt his pretty hair, crisp with curling irons and dripping with my mirth. Okay. By these furies, Turnus was driven. His face burned and spat sparks, and his eyes shot flames. When a bull prepares to fight, he bellows horrifically, and, concentrating his anger in his horns, charges a tree trunk and spars with the wind or scatters the sand with his hooves. Aeneas, too, was like this, a fierce presence in the armor his mother had given him. He whetted his soul for war, and he framed his anger, glad that the war would be settled on the terms he offered. Then he comforted his comrades and Ilius, who was sad and afraid, reminding them of his destiny, and he ordered that a firm and clear response be conveyed to King Latinius, declaring the terms of peace. Dawn scattered radiance on the mountaintops as the horses of the sun rose from the sea, breathing light into from flared nostrils. Rutilians and Trojans had measured the field for combat before the city's walls, and in its center were preparing sod altars to their common gods. Priests in vestments and verbinia on their brows were bringing spring water and fire. The Alcinone army marched out from the gates in close formation. Opposite them, all Trojan and Tyrichian troops streamed forward, variously equipped, but each armed with steel as if for battle. Amid these thousands, the captains rushed, resplendent in gold and purple. Menestheus of the house of the Assaracus, brave Acilius, and Messapus, the breaker of horses, in the line of Neptune. They all withdrew to their own side, struck their spears in the earth, and rested their shields against them. Then eagerly pouring forth, the mothers, the unarmed masses, and the feeble old men sat on rooftops and towers and stood on the gates. Juno was watching all of this from the hill now called the Alban, unnamed at the time, and without fame or glory. She gazed out over the plain at the double lines of Laurentum and Troy, and at Latinius' city. Then she abruptly addressed to goddesses and gods. No, goddesses to goddesses. Turnus' sister, mistress of still water and sounding rivers, and honored Jupiter, lord of the sky, bestowed upon her in return for taking her virginity. Wow, great deal, Jupiter. Ugh. Nymph, glory of the rivers, my heart's delight. I know how I have given you preference over all the Latin girls who have climbed into Jove's thankless bed. You're right about that. You alone I had gladly given a place in heaven. Learn now, Juturnia, and your sorrow. Do not blame me. While fortune seemed to allow it, and the fates permitted Latium to prosper, I protected Turnus in your city. Now I see him facing a destiny that he does not deserve. His doom is upon him, and a fatal strike is near. If I cannot look upon it this ordained combat, if you dare help your brother now, go on, it becomes you. It may still be that better fortune will befall the damned. At this, Juturnia wept profusely, and 4 times, her hand beat her lovely breast. But Juno cried, "This is no time for tears. Hurry, and if there's any way at all to save your brother from death, or renew the war and strike the treaty from their hands, I, Juno, order you to dare to be stupid." Yeah, she's daring to be stupid. Jesus. Okay. With this extortion Juno left in her mind stunned and her heart in pain. And now the kings came forth. Latinius rode in a 4-horse chariot of impressive size. Around his brow shone? Is that even a word? Shone 12 golden rays, insignia of his ancestor, the sun. Turnus drove a white pair and brandished a brace of spears with broad iron heads. From the camp opposite came Aeneas, father of the Roman race, his starry shield and celestial arms in a blaze of glory, and with him was Ascanius, Rome's second hope. A priest in immaculate vestments brought a young boar and an unbored sheep, and set them beside the blazing altars. The heroes faced the rising sun, sprinkled the victims with salted meal, cut the forelocks, and poured libations from shallow bowls upon the altars. Then Pius Aeneas, sword in hand, prayed, "I call witness to the sun, and this land for which I have endured many trials, and the Father Almighty, and you, his consort, Saturnia, kinder at last now, goddess, I pray, and Mars in his glory, father of all war. And I call upon the springs and rivers, and the powers in the air and the blue sea. If victory falls to Turnus the Ausonian, the vanquished will withdraw to Evander's city. Ilius shall leave this land, and Aeneas' son will never return to renew this war, or challenge this realm with sword. But if victory grants that we win the field, as I think we shall be, and may the gods so confirm, I will not demand that the Italians be subject to Tarusians, nor seek dominion for myself. Let both nations, unconquered, commit to everlasting peace under equal laws. I will ordain rights and gods. Latinius, my father-in-law, will retain command. Authority will remain in my father-in-law. For me, the Tusarians will raise my city's walls, and Lavinia will give the town her name." Latinius spoke next. Looking up to heaven, he stretched his right hand to the stars, saying, By these same powers, too, I swear, Aeneas, by the earth, sea, and stars, by Latonia's twins and two-faced Janus, by the lords of the world below and the shrines of Dis, may the Father of all, who sanctions treaties with his thunderbolt, hear my words. I touch the altars and swear by the fires and the gods between us that the day will not dawn and that will break this peace and truce for Italy. However things may fall, nor shall any power change my will, though it may drown earth and flood and dissolve sky into the abyss. Sooner this sceptre I hold will sprout leaves and branch again, though it has been cut at the root, bereft of its mother, and the axe has pared off leaf and twig. Once it was a tree, but now the craftsman's hand has sheathed it in bronze for the elders of Latinium to bear. Pretty intense. With such words, they ratified the treaty in presence of the leaders. Then they cut the throats of the consecrated beasts over the flames, tore out the living entrails, and piled the altar high with platters of meat. Okay. But it had long seemed to the Rutilians that the fight was not fair. Their hearts were filled with doubt, and all the more when they saw the ill-matched combatants up close. Turnus added to their dismay by walking quietly, like a supplicant approaching an altar with downcast eyes, his cheeks hollow, his youthful body pale. When his sister Juturna saw the talk begin to spread and the whole town waver, she entered their midst disguised as Camerus, a man of noble birth whose family had a name for valor, and who was himself a warrior, entered the midst, and knowing well the ways of men, let drop a few choice words. Aren't you ashamed, Rutilians, to risk one man's life when we have an army like this? Aren't we their match in numbers and in strength? Look at this. Look, this is all of them. Trojans, Arcadians, and the superstitious Etrurians who hate Turnus. Even if every other man of us fought, there would barely be enough of them. Turnus's fame will lift him to the gods, upon whose altars he has sworn his life, and shall be kept alive upon the lips of men. But we, our country lost, will become slaves, we who today lounge around in the fields. This brought their feelings to the boiling point, and a murmur rippled through the ranks. Not only were the Rutilians, but the Latins too, transformed, and the Laurentines. Those who had been hoping for rest and safety now wanted the weapons, prayed for the truce to be broken, and pitied Turnus's unjust fate. Juturna showed them something more, a sign in high heaven, none more potent to confuse the minds of the sons of Italy and cheat them in its portent. Flying across the red sky, Jupiter's bird, a golden eagle, was chasing clamorous flock of shorebirds, when it swooped down suddenly to the warrior and snatched in its talons a noble swan. The Italians snapped in attention and saw, to their amazement, all the birds turn flight with a rush of wings that darkened the sky, pursuing their enemy until the eagle, overcome by the attack and the swan's sheer weight, dropped his prey into the stream and took refuge into the clouds. The Rutilians greeted this omen with a shout. They were ready for battle. Ptolemus, the augur, took the lead and cried, "This is what I have been praying for. I acknowledge the gods. With me as their leader, take up your weapons. You have suffered enough, like these frail birds, harassed by a shameless foreign invader who is ravaging your shores. He too will take flight and spread his sail far out to sea. Now close ranks with one heart. Your king has been seized. Fight to defend him." With that, the Ptolemaios ran forward and rifled his spear at the enemy lines. Men could hear the hiss of the colonel's shaft as it split into the air. A thundering shout went up from the crowd, and their hearts raced as the spear flew on. Fate had it that 9 brothers stood in its path. Beautiful boys, born to the Arcadian Gylippus by his faithful Tuscan wife. One of them, especially handsome in his gleaming armor, was hit by the spear, which pierced his ribs just above the buckle of stitch belt, and cinched his waist, and laid him out on the yellow sand. His brothers, a spirited band, were stung with grief and rushed blindly ahead, some with swords drawn, and others with spears. A Laurentine column charged out to meet them, and they were countered by a flood of Trojan and Alpine troops. And the Etruscans, in their emblazoned armor, all with one passion, let the cold steel rule. Their altars were stripped bare, the sky seethed with javelins, and the iron fell hard. Sacred vessels and fires were carried off, and Latinius himself fled, bearing away his defeated gods, the truce null and void. The men reining the chariots or leaping onto horseback, ready with drawn swords. Messapus, in his zeal to overturn the truce, drove his horse straight at the Aulestus and the Etruscan. This man, a king, and wearing a king's insignia. Insignia, yeah, that's how you pronounce it, right? Backed away, tripped and fell head and shoulders onto the altar behind him. Messapus was overhead in a flash, spear in hand, and though Aulestus, a poor wretch, pleaded along and came down hard upon him with his beam of spear and said, "He's had it! One of our better victims for the great gods." We're almost there, guys. Only like 10 pages. And it's the end of the Aeneid. Aren't you excited? The Italians crowded around and stripped the body while it was still warm. Cornelius was in their path, and Odysseus came up to hit him as he snatched out. Okay. Take 2. The Italians crowded around and stripped the body while it was still warm. Cornelius was in their path, and as Odysseus came up to hit him, he snatched up the charred brand from the altar and shoved it in Odysseus' face, igniting his huge beard, which gave up a stench as it burned. Cornelius followed this up by clutching his hair of his bewildered foe in his left hand and coming up hard on his knee to bring him down, when he finished him off with a sword stroke to the side. Podalirius had chased down the shepherd Alsus, and was rushing through a hail of weapons, and towered over him with naked sword. But it was Alsus also, with a swing of his axe, cleaved through his enemy's brown chin, splattering his armor with gore. Iron slumber pressed hard on Podalirius' eyes, and their light shrouded in eternal night. But steadfast Aeneas, head bare, stood stretching out with his unarmed hand and calling in a loud voice to his men, "Where are you going? Why the sudden urge of strife? Hold in your rage! The truce had already been struck, its terms set. I alone have the right to this fight. Let me do it. Forget your fears. This hand will make the treaty true. These rights have already given. Turn this to me." As Aeneas was saying these things, an arrow whistled through the air toward him in a long falling arc, shot by whose hand no one knows, nor whether it was pure chance or some god who brought the Rutilians to this glory. Credit for the deed is hidden, and no one boasted for wounding Aeneas. Oopsie. When Turnus saw Aeneas withdraw and his captains in disarray, he burned with a new hope. He called for his horses and arms, bounded into the chariot, and proudly took the reins into his hands. That chariot ride brought death to many. Many he rolled over half alive, crushing entire platoons under hooves and wheels, and picking off those who tried to escape with spear after spear. Bloodstained Mars thunders with his shield to rouse men to war, and as he gives frenzied horses free rein along the icy Hebrus River, they run so fast over the open plain that not even the winds can keep up, and the land of Thrace moans with the beat of their hooves. Along with the god drive with his satellites, the dark shapes of terror and of rage and treachery. So too Turnus, whipping his foaming, sweat-glazed horses through the lanes of battle, trampling his foes. Pity those under the flying hooves as they splashed through blood and kicked up sand mingled with gore. Oh boy. Thessalonius fell to Turnus at long range. Thamurus and Pholius in close encounters. He also killed from a distance Glaucus and Lades, whom their father, Imbrasus, had raised in Lycia and equipped with matched sets of arms, one for close combat and the other for fighting from wind-swept horses. Elsewhere, Eumedes rode into battle, Dolon's famous son, named after his grandfather, but with the heart and the hands of his father, who at Troy dared to ask his reward for going to spy on the Daunian camp, the horses of Achilles. Diomedes gave him quite a different reward, and Dolon no longer aspired to Achilles' horses. When Turnus saw his son far off to the empty plain, he sent a spear through the empty space, and then, catching up to the man, halted his team and jumped from his chariot, standing over the fallen, dying Eumedes. Turnus planted a foot on his neck, wrested the sword from his hand, and reddened the shining blade deep in his throat, saying, "Take a good look, Trojan, at these fields. The Hesperians have come to conquer in war. Lie here and measure out every acre. This is for the reward for those who try me with the sword, and this is how they build their city walls." And then, with the cast of a spear, Turnus sent Abystis to keep Eumedes company, and added Chlorius Subaru. I want to buy a Subaru. Sybaris dares, and oh my god, there's Seleucus, and Theomotes, who fell from the neck of his bucking horse. The north wind roars up on the deep Aegean and drives the waves shoreward, and where the wind swoops down, clouds scud through the sky. Wherever Turnus cut his path, the ranks fell back, and his men turned and ran. His momentum carried him on, as his chariot split the air. His plumes streamed in the wind. Phegeus could not bear to face this onslaught. Half out of his mind, he threw himself in front of the chariot and, grabbing the reins, wrenched aside the frothing jaws of the horses, while he dragged along, hanging from the yoke. Turnus's broad lance found his unguarded side and ripped through the double-plated corselet, just grazing the skin. But as Phegeus twisted around and tried to engage his sword, the turning wheel ran him over onto the ground. And as Turnus passed by, he swung his blade between the lower rim of Phegeus' helmet and the upper edge of his breastplate, slicing up his head, and left his maimed body to lie in the sand. While Turnus was dealing death all over the plain, Menestheus and loyal Achates, with Ascanius by their side, led Aeneas into the camp, bleeding and limping as he leaned from his spear. He grit his teeth as he struggled to extract the head of the broken shaft. He called for the most direct approach, telling them to cut the wound down to the dark recess where the point was lodged and send him back into battle. What a trooper, Aeneas. And now, Iapix was there, Aeacius' son, dearest of all to Thetis Apollo. The god, deeply in love with the boy, had offered to give him all of his arts, prophecy, the lyre, his own swift arrows. But Iapix, whose father was dying, wanted to put off his fate, and to that end preferred to know the virtues of herbs and the skills of a healer to practice, without glory, the silent arts. Aeneas leaned on his great spear, chafing at the delay, surrounded by the oh my god, a crowd of warriors. How sad, his sad alias among them. The hero stood, unmoved by their tears. The aged physician tucked up his robes in the Phoenoan fashion, and treated Aeneas with his healing hands, and Phoebus' potent herbs. But all in vain. In vain he pulled at the arrow with forceps, with no good fortune, no help from Apollo. Panic and rout were spreading more widely over the plains. War's horror was upon them. The sky was a solid wall of dust, the horsemen closing in fast, spears and arrows rained down from the camp, and an iron noise rose from heaven with the cries of men fighting and the men falling under the fist of Mars. Then Venus, shaken by her son's undeserved pain, plucked from the Cretan Ida a stalk of dittany with downy leaves and purple flowers. An herb wild goats ate when shot with an arrow. This herb Venus brought down, her face shrouded in mist. She steeped the plant in a gleaming cauldron full of river water to bring out its hidden medicinal virtues, and sprinkled the juices of healing ambrosia and fragrant panacea. Not knowing what he held, old Iapix was bathing Aeneas' wound with his water. Suddenly, all the pain went out of his body. The wound stopped bleeding, the arrow slipped easily out of the healer's hand, and all of Aeneas' old strength had returned. Yay! Hurry and bring the man his weapons! Why are you standing here? Iapix had said this, and he was the first to fire them up for battle. This did not happen by any human power, nor was it my hand that saved you, Aeneas. A greater power, a god is at work here, and is sending you back to do greater deeds. Aeneas was hungry for the fight, impatient of many a delay. He clapped golden greaves onto his shins and started handling the spear. As soon as his breastplate was strapped on and his shield was fitted to his side, he put his arms around Ascanius, kissed him lightly through his helmet, and said, we need a heroic, strong, manly music here. Maybe I'll add it in. Who knows? Probably would be copyright strike, though. Learn how to be a good man from me, my son. Learn good fortune from others. Today, my hand will defend you in war and lead you to great rewards. When you come of age, see to it that you remember the example of your kinsmen, and that your father Aeneas and your uncle Hector will enliven your soul. Aeneas spoke and moved through the gates, huge himself and brandishing a massive spear. Close by his side were Antheus and Menisthus, and behind them an entire army pulled out, emptying the camp. The plain boiled with blinding dust, and the shocked earth trembled under the tramping feet. From the wall opposite, Turnus saw them coming. The Ausonians saw them, and the cold shudder ran through their bones. Before any of the Latins turned and heard the sound, knew it, turned and fled. Aeneas was flying, and his dark line of troops had drawn in his wake over the open plain. When a storm breaks out the sea, and the rain cloud moves toward land, pity the farmers whose persistent hands knew what is coming and shudder. Trees will be brought down, crops ruined, everything scattered. The winds run before it, and the howls carried shoreward. Just so the Trojan commander brought his troops up to the front, and they massed around him. What kind of name is that? Thembre, Thembreus landed his sword on Os. You know what I hate about these epic tradition books? The dumb names. Yeah, they're great, but also there's too many vowels, man. Like the name Aeneas, like that's way too many vowels for that short of a name to have. Not okay. Gersh. Okay, back to the book. Osiris. Osiris. Osiris? Yeah, Osiris. Menestus killed the Acratus, Acatus, Apollo, Gaius Euphens. Even Telemnius fell, the augur who was first to hurl a spear in the enemy's face. A shout split through the air, and the routed Rutilians turned around in a cloud of dust and ran through the fields. Aeneas didn't even bother with these fugitives, or those who opposed him, or on foot or mounted. Turnus alone, he tracked through the thickening gloom. Turnus alone, he called out to combat. Juturnia, in her deep distress, knocked Turnus' driver, Metiscus, out of the chariot and left him behind. The warrior goddess assumed his form, his voice and armor, and took the rippling reins. A black swallow flits to the mansion of a wealthy lord, winging her way through the high halls to scavenge scraps and crumbs for her chirping nestlings, and twittering in and out of the porticos and about the courtyard pools. So too Juturnia guided the horses through the enemy ranks and flew in the chariot all over the field, giving them the glimpse of her exultant brother, now here, now there, never allowing them to lock up in combat, but always flitting away. Still, Aeneas kept tracking Turnus down through the winding maze of war, calling him, and when he spotted him, sprinting toward to match the hero's speed. The horse's speed, only to have Juturnia wrench the chariot aside. What could he do? He was all at sea, his mind teemed with contrary directions. Meanwhile, Messapus, treading lightly and carrying 2 javelins tipped with steel, rifled one of them at him with a deadly aim. Aeneas went down to one knee and crouched behind his shield as the spearhead sheared from the crest of his helmet. He felt a sudden attack, a surge of anger at this treacherous attack. No. I read that wrong. I apologize. He felt a sudden surge of anger at this treacherous attack. He saw Turnus' chariot pulling away, calling to witness Jupiter himself in the altars of broken treaty. Aeneas plunged into the general combat, and, with Mars at his back, began to kill indiscriminately, giving his rage free rein. What god could now unfold for me so many bitter deaths? Which poet could tell of all the captains who met their many dooms, driven over by the plain, now by Turnus, now by the Trojan hero? Did it please you, Jupiter, the nations destined to live in everlasting peace should clash so harshly? It pleases Hera, Juno, that's who. Aeneas, in the first combat that halted the Trojans' onrush, paused only briefly to take out Sucro, driving his steel through the ribcage, where the death comes most quickly. Turnus unhorsed Amycus and his brother Dioris, and advancing on foot struck down his long spear, the other with his sword, then hanging their severed heads from his chariot. He bore them, dripping off dewdrops of blood. Aeneas sent to their deaths Talus, Tanius, and brave Cethegus, all 3 in one assault, and then dispatched the shout Onites, Athenian whose mother was Perdida. Yeah, Perdida. Oh, Peridia. Oh, looks like Perdida. Peridia. Turnus's next victims were the brothers sent from Apollo's Lycian fields, and Menoetes, and an Arcadian who hated warfare in vain. This man had been a humble fisherman near the pools of Lerna. He had no patrons, and his father tilled a rented plot of land. Like fire, it's set on different sides of the wood, a dry thicket of crackling laurels, or like rivers roaring down a mountainside, destroying everything in its path. Poor guy, he's just a fisherman. Ugh. And he's in a freaking war that shouldn't even exist if it weren't for Juno. Ugh. I'm gonna play a little bit. Okay. So Aeneas and Turnus swept to the battle, each of them seething with anger within. Hearts bursting, neither wielding an inch, and all within desire, and all their desire was to wound men with steel. Merneus was boasting his ancient lineage, stretching back to Latin kings, when Aeneas hit him with a huge stone that pitched him headfirst over his car, where he was trampled by horses who did not remember their master. Helios charged forward with an insane fury when Turnus rifled the spear at his golden brow. The point pierced his helmet and struck his brain. And you, Cretheus, bravest of the Greeks, your right hand did not save you from Turnus, nor did Sepinthus' gods protect him. When Aeneas came, he put his chest in the way of Aeneas' spear, and the slight reprieve of his bronze shield did not help him much. You too, Aeolus, fell at Laurentum and spread your body out in the fields. You, whom the Argive army could not lay low, nor Achilles destroy of Priam's realm. Here was your end. Your home was in Laurentius under Mount Ida. In Laurentium is your grave. Now, all up and down the lines, both armies engaged, all the Latins and all the Trojans, Mencius and intense Seretus, Messapus, brake of horses, and brave Acilius, Tuscan troops and Evander's Arcadians, each doing his utmost, each at its limit, no rest, no respite in the vast open conflict. Aeneas' mother now put in his mind to advance on the walls, attack the town with abrupt force, and throw the Latins into confusion at the sudden slaughter. Tracking Turnus through the lanes of the battle, he swept his eyes in every direction and saw the city untouched by the war, quiet and at peace. At once, a vision of greater conflict burned into his mind, summoning Menistius, Sergistus, and brave Seretus. He climbed up He climbed up a mound to which the rest of the Trojans came to a turn, and still holding their spears and shields, Aeneas, standing on their height, addressed to them. I want no delay in carrying out my orders. Jupiter is on our side, and I don't want anyone holding back because the decision is sudden. That city, the cause of this war, the heart of Latinius' realm. Unless they surrender and submit to our rule, that city I will today overthrow it, and then land its smoking roofs level with the ground. Am I supposed to wait until Turnus feels like doing battle with me, until he comes back from war, beaten though he is? This is the crux of this accursed war, men. Bring torches and reclaim the treaty with fire! They outdid each other in their eagerness, formed a wedge, and advanced to the walls in mass. Ladders and torches appeared from nowhere. One group stormed the gates and cut down the guards. Others darkened the sky with their javelins. Aeneas himself stood at the foot of the wall, stretched out his hand, and in a great voice accused Latinius, calling the gods to witness that he was being forced into battle again, that the Latins had twice become his foes, twice broken a treaty, Inside the walls, strife arose among anxious citizens. Some wanted the city gates thrown open to the Dardanians, and called for the king to be dragged to the walls. Others brought arms and marched out to defend their city. City. A shepherd has followed bees to their hive and tunneled pruments and filled it with smoke. Anxious for the realm, the bees scurry this way and that to the wax fortress, and with loud buzzing hone their rage. The black stench billows through their halls. The rock surrounds with a blind hum, and smoke comes out into the empty air. There was more grief for the weary Latins, and it shook the city to its very foundations. When the queen saw the enemy coming into the town, the walls breached, roofs of flames, and no Vertilians, no troops of Turnus opposing them, this poor woman believed that he had perished in battle. In her distress she cried out, and that she was the cause and origin of all these evils, and said many other things in her frenzied grief. Determined to die, she tore her royal robes, and from a high beam hung a noose for her hideous death. When the Latin woman found her dead, first her daughter Lavinia tore out her golden hair and scored her cheeks, and all the people around her raved, and the house resounded with their laments. The sad news spread to the city. Minds and hearts sank. Latinius with rent garments, dazed by his wife's deaths and the city's ruin, his white hair grimed with dust. During all this time, Turnus was pursuing a handful of stragglers at the edge of the plain, moving more slowly now, less and less happy with his horse's brilliance. The wind carried to him unseen terrors and clamor from the town. Then, as he listened intensely, a puzzle of sound struck his ears, the murmur of suffering. What are all these cries coming from the city? It must be bad if I can hear it from here. Distracted, he drew in the reins and stopped. His sister, who still looked like Metiscus, and was as such steering the chariot, faced him and said, "Let's keep after the Trojans out here, where we are already winning. There are other troops to defend the town. Aeneas is taking it to the Italians now, and we should be dealing death to the Trucians. You'd kill just as many here, with no less armor." To which Turnus replied, "I knew it was you long ago, sister, when you entered this war, and tricked us into breaking truce. And you don't fool me now, goddess. But why come down from Olympus and endure all of this? So you can see your brother's miserable death? What can I do? There are no guarantees. I saw Murranus run before my own eyes, calling me as he went down. No one meant more to me. Murranus." Sounds like Marinus. A mighty man undone by a mighty wound. Poor Ufnens died so he wouldn't have to see my disgrace. The Trojans have his body and his arms. And now I should allow our homes to be destroyed, the final touch, and not refute rates? Turn tail and let this land see Turnus in flight? Is it so bad to die? Shades below, be good to me, since the will of heaven has turned against thee. I will go down to you, holy in spirit, innocent of any guilt, and never unworthy of any forebears. He had scarcely finished when Sacus, his face wounded with an arrow, came riding up on a panting horse through enemy lines, calling Turnus by names and imploring him. "Turnus, you're our last hope. Pity your people. Aeneas is storming in battle and threatening to throw down the Italians' upmost towers and destroy them utterly. Torches are already flying to the roofs. The Latins are turning all eyes on you, Turnus. King Latinius himself murmurs about who to call his son and to which lines he should turn. Moreover, the queen, who has put all her trust in you, is dead by her own hand, gone from the world of light. Only Messapus and Atinius are holding the gates, surrounded by squadrons bristling with steel, while you wheel your chariot around them in a freaking empty field." Turnus was stunned by this changed picture of his fortunes. He stood rooted in silence, his great heart roiling in shame, with grief and verging on madness, with frenzied love and undeniable courage. When the shadows parted and light returned to his mind, he swept the blazing eyes toward the walls, and furious, and looked back from his chariot to the great city. Flames were spiraling skyward from story to story, about to catch the tower, a defensive bulwark he himself had built, set on wheels and hung on gangways. Now, sister, the fates triumph at last. Stop holding back. We will follow where God and cruel fortune call us. My mind is made up. I will meet alliance and bear death's bitterness. No longer, sister, will you see me ashamed. But first, allow me to rage with furious rage. Turnus spoke, who leapt down from his chariot and careened madly through enemy lines, leaving his sorrowing sister behind. Think of a stone crashing down a mountain. Either a storm washed it free, or time in its passing had loosened it, and now the shameless mass of rock sweeps down over the steep slopes and bounds over the earth, rolling along in its trees, herds, and men. So too Turnus, scattering the ranks, and in his rush to the walls where the ground was most soaked with blood and the air lined with spears, Turnus lifted his head and spoke, and had their immediate attention and spoke. Fall back, Rutilians, and you, Latins, hold your fire. Whatever fortune is here is mine. It's better for your sake that I alone make good a treaty and settle the issue with steel. And the troops made room for him in the middle. When Father Aeneas heard Turnus' name, he left the walls and left the high fortress, jettisoned everything he had been doing, and in great exultation clashed his weapons. The sound was like thunder, and the hero, as vast as Mount Athos, as vast as Eryx, as vast as Father Apennine himself, with shimmering oaks, when he roars in joy and lifts his snowy head toward heaven. Now every last man turned and stared, every Rutilian, Trojan and Italian soldier, both those high on the walls and those below who were battering the walls, and they all took off their armor. Latinius himself was lost in wonder that these two great men, born in different parts of the world, had met and now would settle the issue with steel. As soon as the field was cleared out on the plain, and they sprinted forward, they threw their spears from afar, and then waded into battle with a clash of bronze. Earth groaned. Sword struck sword with stroke after stroke, luck and valor blending into one. In great Scylla, or high on Tabernus, two bulls have locked horn into mortal combat. The keepers fall back in fear, and all the cattle stand on silent dread, the heifers musing on who will be lord of the entire herd. The bulls butt heads with tremendous force and gore each other, bathing their backs and shoulders with blood, and the whole grove resounds with belly-ringing groans. So too the Trojan and Daunian horses clashed shield against shield, and filled the sky with crashing thunder. Jupiter himself held up the silent scale and placed upon them the destinies of each man to determine whom the battle doomed, whose wake sank down to the earth. Turnus, thinking he could get away with it, sprang forward with sword and lifted high, and put all his weight onto his sweeping stroke. A shout went up from both armies. Trojans and Latins, both straining to see, expected, but the treacherous sword only splintered in mid-stroke. When Turnus saw that his right hand held an unfamiliar hilt, he fled, faster than the east wind. The story is told that when Turnus first mounted his chariot, he neglected in his haste to bring his father's sword, and snatched up instead the blade of Metiscus, his charioteer. This served him well enough when he was chasing down Trucian stragglers, but when it came up against the divine armor forged by Vulcan, The mortal blade shattered like brittle ice into fragments that glittered onto the yellow sand. Turnus ran like a madman this way and that across the plain, weaving in circles. The Trucians closed in, confining him between the walls in the desolate marsh. Aeneas, though his knees were slowed by an arrow wound, and he was not at full speed, nevertheless stayed hot on his heels. Oh my god, how long is this? Ugh. A hunting hound caught by a stag, hemmed in by a stream or crimson feathers that hunters use to hedge in game. The dog runs and barks and worries the stag, who in terror of the snares in the high bank runs back and forth in 1,000 directions. But King Umbrian hound stays close, mouth gaping wide. The hound almost seizes it, and snaps his jaws shut as if it had seized it, but bites only the empty air. Another shout arose, echoed by the banks and pools, and the skies thundered with tumult below. While Turnus ran, while he was in full flight, he approached the Rutulians, calling them by name, clamoring for his sword. Aeneas, though, promised instant death for anyone who would come near, and made them tremble by threatening to level the town. Wounded, he pressed on as they ran in loops, circling 5 times, and doubling back he unwove all their circuits. For they were not running for some trivial prize at games, but for the lifeblood of Turnus. There was a bitter-leaved wild olive tree, sacred to Faunus out on the plain, revered by all mariners. Onto this tree they would attach their offering to the Laurentine god, and in its branches hang their votive garlands. But the Trucians, with no guards for the tree's sanctity, had cut it down so they could fight in an open field. The spear Aeneas had thrown was struck through the roots of this tree, and the Trojan now stooped to pull it out so he could take the weapon down. So he could take down with his weapon the man who he could not catch on foot. Turnus, out of his mind with fear, cried out, "Have pity with me, Faunus and Mother Earth! Hold fast the spear, if I have ever honored you, whom the men of Aeneas now profane in war." He spoke, and the gods heard his prayer. Aeneas struggled along with the pilliant root, but could not, with all his strength, force open its stubborn grip. And while he staggered, Juturnia, transformed again into Metiscus, ran up and handed his brother his sword. Venus, outraged with the nymph's audacity, came down and plucked the spear out from the root. The 2 heroes, weapons and spirits restored, one thrusting his sword, the other towering with his spear, both panting and for breath, stood face to face in the arena of war. Meanwhile, the Lord of Olympus addressed Juno as she watched the fighting from a golden cloud. "Juno, my wife, how will it end? What remains at last? You yourself know, and you admit that you know, that Aeneas, the hero of his country, is destined to be exalted to the stars. What are you pretending? With what hope that a god be profaned by a mortal's wound? That the sword be returned by Juturnia could never, or that strength increase in the vanquished. Desist and yield at last to my prayers, lest your great grief consume you in silence, lest your bitter woes return to me often from your sweet lips. We have come to the end. You will have the power to pursue the Trojans over land and sea, to kindle a terrible war, to disfigure our home and blend bridals of grief. I forbid you to attempt more." Thus Jupiter, and thus Saturn's daughter, with downcast eyes. "It was because I knew this was your will, my mighty lord, that with great reluctance I left Earth and left Turnus. Otherwise, you would not see me sitting here alone on my airy throne, enduring it all, right or wrong. No, I would be standing turned in flame. In the front lines of battle, dragging the Trojans into mortal combat. As for Juturna, yes, I pleaded her to help her brother, and for his life's sake I sanctioned daring deeds. But not to shoot the arrow, not to bend the bow. I swear to this, by the impassable river water of Styx, this one inviolable oath to the gods above. And now I yield, and quit this loathsome war. I have one solemn request of you, though, something not prohibited by fate, for Latinium's sake, and for your people's majesty, when soon, let it be, they make peace with happy weddings, and form alliances with laws and treaties. Do not command the native Latins to change their ancient name, nor become Trojans and be called Trucians, nor to change the language or in dress. Let Latium be. Let Album's kings rule through the ages, and let the Roman stock be strong in Italian manhood. Troy has fallen. Let the name of Troy be fallen too. Smiling at her, the world's creator said, You are Jove's true sister, and Saturn's child. The waves of warmth that will roll deep through your breast. Come, dismiss the fury that was roused in vain. I grant your request, and I willingly relent that the Ausonians will keep their native tongue and their ancestral ways. As their name is now, so shall it be. The Trucians will be absorbed in the body at large. I will establish the sacred rites, and... Wait, is this... Oh, this is Jupiter talking. I should do his voice. I already forgot what voice I put for him. You are Jove's true sister, and Saturn's child. I think I made him have a dumb voice. You are Jove's true sister and Saturn's child, the waves of warmth that roll deep in your breast. Come, dismiss the fury that was aroused in vain. I will grant your request, and I willingly relent. The Ausonians will keep their native tongue and their ancestral ways. As their name is now, so shall it be. The Trucians will be absorbed into the body at large. I will establish their sacred rites and laws, and make all Latins with a single tongue. From then shall rise a race blended with Ausonian blood, that you shall see surpass both gods and men in faith and loyalty. And no nation shall be more zealous in Juno's worship. The goddess nodded, happy to assent, then left the cloud and departed from the sky. This done, the father pondered how to withdraw Juturna from her brother's side. There are twin fiends, whom men called Dirae, born to the night goddess in the same litter as hellish Megaria. Their mother wreathed the heads of all three with coiling snakes and gave them wings to ride the wind. These two Dirae attend the throne of Jupiter and whet the fears of feeble mortals when the grim monarch visits them with disease and death, or terrorizes guilty cities with war. Jove sent one of them down from high heaven with instructions to appear as an omen before Juturna. The fiend flew down to the earth in a whirling wind, like an arrow speeding from a bowstring into a cloud bank. A poisoned arrow sought by a Parthian archer, a Parthian or a Sidonian, an incurable shout, whining unseen through the flitting shadows. Thus the child of night, seeding through the earth, and when she came in sight of the Trojan ranks and the troops of Turnus, she suddenly shrank into the shape of an owl, the small bird that often perches at night on tombs and deserted rooftops, singing in its late, unwelcome song through the shadows. So transformed, the fiend flits and screams before the face of Turnus, her dark wings beating his shield. A strange, numbing dread washed through Turnus's body. His hair bristled with fear. His voice stuck in his throat. His sister, Juturna, recognized from afar the harsh whisper of the dead one's wings. She tore out her unbound hair, her nails clawed her face, and she pounded her breast with her fists. Then she cried out to her brother, "How can your sister help you now, Turnus? And what is left of my own hard life? Nothing I will do will prolong the life for you. Can I oppose this terrible portent? Now at last I quit the field. Don't try to scare me, you ill-omened vultures. I am already afraid. I know the beating of your wings, the sound of death, and I do not mistake the haughty commands of Jupiter. Is this how he compensated me for my lost virginity? Why did he give me life everlasting? If only I could die, I could end this sorrow, go through the shadows at my poor brother's side. I, immortal? Nothing can be sweet without you, brother. What ground can gape deep enough to send a goddess to the deepest shades?" So saying, Juturna covered her head with a sea-gray veil. Moaning profusely, the goddess plunged into the river's depths. Aeneas kept the pressure on, rocking his tree of a spear, and cried savagely, "What's the delay now, Turnus? This isn't a foot race, you know. It's hand-to-hand combat with cold steel. Go ahead, change yourself into all sorts of shape. Collect your courage and skill. Fly away, high on wings if you want, up to the stars, or sink into the hollow earth. I will get you still." And Turnus, shaking his head, "You don't scare me, big mouth. The gods scare me, and having Jupiter as my enemy." Turnus said no more. Looking around, we saw a huge stone lying on the plain, a stone ancient and huge, set in place to settle boundary disputes. 12 chosen men could scarcely lift it up onto their shoulders, as men are now. But the hero scooped it up quickly, rose it to his full height, and with a burst of speed hurled it at his adversary. But as he ran, he did not know himself, did not know who he was. As he moved, this immense stone lifted it and sent it flying. His knees buckled, his blood was like ice. The stone itself, rolling through the empty air, fell short and did not deliver its blow. In dreams, when night's weariness weighs on our eyes, we are desperate to run farther and farther, but collapse weakly in the middle of our efforts. Our tongue doesn't work, our usually strength fails our body, and words will not come. So too Turnus. However bravely he tried, the dread one would not let him win through. Shifting images spun through his mind. He looked at the Rutulians and the town, frozen with fear. He saw death closing in and trembled, nowhere to escape, no way to attack his enemy. He could not see his chariot, or his sister, the charioteer. While Turnus faltered, Aeneas' fatal spear quivered in delight. Seeing his chance, he put all his weight behind a long-range throw, and his weapon threw with a deadly force, faster than the stone hurled by the catapult, and with a sound louder than thunder, roaring through the air like a black tornado. It tore through Turnus' 7-ply shield, ripped through his corselet, and with a hiss, sliced through his thigh. Huge Turnus sank down on one knee. The Rutulians leapt up with a shout, and the woods and hills echoed through their groans. Humbled, Turnus lifted his eyes to Aeneas and stretched forth his hand in supplication. "Go ahead. Here's your chance. I deserve it. I will not ask for anything for myself. But if a parent's grief can still touch you, and pity on Dionysus' old age, I beg of you, give me, or if you prefer, give my dead body back to my people. You've beaten me, and the Ausonians have seen me beaten. Stretch out my hand to you. Lavinia is yours. Let your hatred stop here." Aeneas stood there, lethal in his bronze. His eyes searched the distance, and his hand paused on the hilt of the sword. Turnus' words were winning him over, but his gaze shifted to the fateful baldric on his enemy's shoulder, and the belt glittered with a familiar metalwork. The belt of young Pallas, whom Turnus had killed, and whose insignia now he wears a trophy. Aeneas's eyes drank this memorial of his own savage grief, and then burning with fury and terrible in his wrath, he said, "Do you think you can get away from me while you are wearing the spoils of one of my men? Pallas sacrifices you with this stroke. Pallas, it makes you pay with your guilty blood." Saying this, and seething with rage, Aeneas buried his sword into Turnus' chest. The man's limbs went limp and cold, and with a moan, his soul fled resentfully down to the shades. Woo, we're done. There's Aeneid. Yeah, bye.